I am super pumped for today's show because I've got my guy JJ Jackson back. And of course, we had to talk a little Carolina Duke, right? Is Wayne Ellington right for quote tweeting Gerald Henderson? Is Coach Carroll out of place for getting upset in the handshake line? I mean, more importantly, Jerry Stackhouse had a little comment here or there, but nothing beats Caleb Love and Theo John's beef. I mean, we all thought the rivalry was dead, but I would like to beg to differ.
You are Locked On ACC, your daily podcast on the Atlantic Coast Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to today's edition of Locked On ACC. I'm your host, Candace Cooper, joined by our usual JJ Jackson here on Tuesdays, the Locked On Blue Devils podcast host. And we have so much fun stuff to go over. Today's episode of Locked On ACC is brought to you by RunYourPool. March Madness is here, and RunYourPool has a better way to create your bracket. RunYourPool.com, the premier sports pool hosting service. JJ, it's so good to see you, my friend.
It is equally as great to see you, Candace Cooper. It has been far too long.
Yes.
It has turned into one of my busiest times of the year. Now with baseball and softball in full swing, actually got to make a ACC Network softball debut this past weekend with Duke and Georgia Tech, and plenty of work on the SEC Network. So sorry for the tough times coming through with schedules and that sort of thing, but I have continued to listen to every single moment of Locked On ACC because I know that the Duke Blue Devils have been in plenty of headlines, and I've enjoyed your perspective on all of it. So we're back to our usual Tuesday chats, and I couldn't be more thrilled, Candace.
There we go. Listen, it's nothing wrong with being booked and busy for good reason. And of course,
Exactly.
You are super, super in the works of doing good things. So of course, kudos to you for that. And I think this is the perfect time for you to rejoin the group because we have a lot to go over with your Blue Devils after Saturday's matchup. We talked a little bit about it on Monday's show, but because you're here, of course, I also did Locked On Heels, a little bit of a mini interview with Isaac Shea, the new host over there. So if you guys have not checked that out, make sure you do. But JJ's
Please
here.
do, and he's doing a great job. Isaac has been awesome. We did a crossover before the first Duke and UNC meeting this year. And make sure you check all that stuff out because I enjoyed listening to the Tar Heels perspective on their Monday edition, recapping the win for North Carolina.
No doubt. I love him simply because he has the world's greatest camera. I'm like, I don't know. That made you look like a superstar, right? So there it is. But Coach K's farewell tour has come to a immediate little pit stop. So we're done with the regular season, right? We're tuning up. We're getting ready for postseason life and all that good stuff. But all the pomp and circumstance, every balloon you can imagine, the confetti, the royal blue carpet, we should say, was rolled out. We had 80 plus players in the building. Everything was set for the Duke Blue Devils to dominate Carolina, come with this, post-game story where we're talking about how great he is, the legacy. He's gotten teary-eyed. I'm just like feeling it. I'm paying $5,000 to sit in a hot box, and hopefully I want to see a win. And then 94-81, Carolina says, wait a gosh darn minute. Let's ruin this retirement party. What was your mood once you saw it was not going to go in the Blue Devils' favor?
Unbelievably hurt for sure. What would be the mood? And I will also say that my close friends and family do know that going into it, I didn't have a great feeling about it, which shocked a lot of people because Duke was overwhelmingly favored against North Carolina. But it just goes to show, we talk about it a lot on this show. And I know it's not just Locked On North Carolina schools in the ACC, it's Locked On ACC as a whole. But what that rivalry has done for the conference is just unbelievable. And it is the greatest rivalry in college basketball. Truly anything can happen. I posted earlier today about 5 different times since the year 2000 that we've seen Duke win in Chapel Hill and North Carolina win in Cameron. And look, you're going to get up for the biggest games. And that's what North Carolina did in this one. And then from the Duke perspective, you're asking these 18 and 19-year-olds, because the team is so young, to play basketball in front of the greatest Duke basketball players ever. That was so cool, so emotional. Coach K saying after the game he didn't think he would cry, and he did cry. Like, that got to me. But are you kidding me? Christian Laettner is there with J.J. Redick and Grant Hill and Shane Battier and Trajan Langdon and all of these amazing players over the years for Duke basketball. And our current team has to be like, all right, let's go get a win. And unfortunately, it just didn't happen.
Yeah, and I think it's crazy because when you name all these people, you're talking about royalty, not just for Duke's sake, but for actual college
Yeah.
basketball's sake, right? People who have stamped their name and cemented their legacy. And to go out there and try and perform, maybe the moment was too big. And not to say these guys can't handle it, but it just felt like even the best of the best, right? You could say from the outside, not having to play this game, like the Jay Williams of the world and all
Right.
these guys, like, oh, I would have, you don't know what you would have done if you saw 80 legends out there and trying to, go and compete against your biggest rival.
And that played for your head coach that you're also playing for in his final game inside Cameron Indoor Stadium, knowing a ceremony is coming after the fact, knowing that North Carolina wants to get you back because you beat them by 20 at their place earlier in the year, knowing that there are not just former Duke players in there, like we saw when Zion Williamson came to town or played Carolina in the Cameron Indoor Stadium game, and all of a sudden you see Barack Obama walk out onto the floor. It turned into a who's who
Yeah.
at the Duke Carolina game this past. The internet learned that Jerry Seinfeld has children, his own children, that are students at Duke University. And then he's
Right.
sitting next to NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. Kyler Murray is there. Last time I checked, he played college football at Texas A&M and Oklahoma. No ties to the school whatsoever. Dirk was there on the basketball side of things. Theo was there. Todd Gurley
Yes.
was there. I mean, it was just like, wow, a who's who.
Wasn't
And
it
he
what
was
Ken
left.
Chung from?
Yes,
Yes.
yes,
Mhm.
absolutely, from The Hangover,
Yep.
a Duke grad that was in. Tim Cook is the
Yep.
CEO of Apple,
Yeah.
and he's a Duke grad. He was in attendance. I mean, everybody was there, and, I think
Insane.
the pressure might have got to them a little bit.
Yeah, it's really, again, it's difficult to play that game any day of the week. Fans know fans, but you add on all of that extra stuff, you're asking a lot of some literally
Right,
teenagers,
right.
right? But X's and O's aside, I think some of the best parts of this is we talked about Coach K, Coach Williams, Dean Smith, all these great coaches that make this rivalry great. But if you don't feel like the energy is here to stay, I beg to differ. Did we see the Theo, John, and Caleb Love beef? Like all these things from Armando Bacot and having his post talking about you're not a savage until you meet one. All of those energy things that you're like, okay, maybe the kids will be all right, right? And maybe the rivalry is in good hands.
Yeah, it's not going anywhere, and if anybody felt that way, I mean,
Yeah.
my gosh, what do you think? The schools at the end of the day are still less than 10 miles apart from one another. You're
Yeah.
gonna see each other around town all the time. I mean, you were a student athlete at UNC. You know what that's like to see Duke folks out and about all the time and to kinda have those rivalries built in and know that it's the game that everybody's talking about. It doesn't matter how good these teams are. It is always going to be in the primetime spot on ESPN because the rivalry warrants that. And so, there are always gonna be high expectations going into a night like that. And now that we've seen Hubert Davis knock off his first season of competing in the rivalry, John Shire right around the corner, and as you mentioned, the players that are still out there a part of this rivalry, it's still going to be heated. It's still going to be the greatest rivalry in college basketball, even though Coach K will no longer be on the sidelines.
Yeah, absolutely. One thought I want to share before I transition and ask you a couple more questions. I think for me, the greatest part was getting to see those kids go in Franklin because, you talk about COVID year, you talk about even last year and having the way Franklin Street is roped off and, you can't exactly rush the same way you used to. For me, it was like, okay, I enjoy the fact that these kids get to be college students for once. Like you get to rush, you get to experience what people have been, talking up for years
Right.
and years. And now you have the opportunity just to go play in some fire, just to go get hype. Even the kids from Krzyzewskiville, like you get to just have that moment where you tint out and you're able to tailgate all day and get yourself hyped for the moment. Now, while the tear memes were great, I still, I'm excited that they got to have that opportunity. It's one that they'll never forget, good or bad, right? It's one you'll never forget.
It was amazing. We certainly loved all the dancing that took place in both locker rooms
Yeah.
this year, right? Because, I mean, like we said, Duke goes into Chapel Hill and wins by 20, and you best believe the music started playing as soon as they got back into the locker room. At the very end of the game,
100%.
Duke goes back into the locker room before Coach K comes out to address the crowd, and there's like the camera shot of Caleb Love essentially jumping down the stairs to get down to the North Carolina locker room because they know how much of a celebration it's going to be. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm glad it felt normal again. And let's turn the chapter. I hate it ended that way for Coach K, but there's still 9 games potentially left to be won by Coach K and this Duke basketball team. And if they win a national championship, Candace, we're going to forget all about this.
Yeah, listen, I totally agree. I think that's at the end of the day, not national, regular season championship is great. You claim claim that title. Now you have the opportunity to see a little bit more. I want to get into the ACC tournament because the fact that Carolina and Duke can possibly meet again is pretty wild to me. But first, I want to remind you guys again that today's episode is brought to you by Run Your Pool, but I'm going to get even more action when it comes to March Madness. I'm going to talk about StatHero. StatHero's NCAA game, single game pick'ems pits the star players against each other in the amazing hybrid between fantasy and sports gambling. Man, do I love it. I actually went deep and even won some money throughout my time getting a little bets in there. I'm hedging my bets this year with StatHero's NCAA Pick'em contest. I start focusing on the players I know best with a gameplay that doesn't rely on big spreads, long odds, or funky props. StatHero is the easiest and fastest way to get your sports action fix. The simple, sleek gameplay will have you playing in minutes. This is what daily fantasy was meant to be. So make sure you are getting in on the game. Sign up for free right now at stathero.com/locked on. We're rocking and rolling here. JJ Jackson in the building, Locked on Blue Devils host, and we are talking about the ACC men's basketball tournament. Shout out to the North Carolina State women who took home their title. If you listened to yesterday's show, Kenton Gibbs clearly knows all about those champions, and we are locked and loaded and ready for what should be a great start tonight. Really, we should say today. 2 p.m. We'll see Pitt take on Boston College. We'll see at 4:30 Clemson take on NC State. And then at 7, we will see Louisville take on Georgia Tech. So for those opening games, we can start there before we get into what could be a potential rematch between Duke and Carolina. But for those opening games, does anything jump out about you? Or do you feel like, do you feel like anybody can win these games throughout the whole tournament? But for these ones up in here, these first ones that you're going to have to play 4 days straight, can anybody kind of sneak in and maybe run the gambit and be a Tuesday champion when it's all said and done?
So, Candace, here's my first thought when we look at the ACC tournament, and you're absolutely going to love this, right? Because you mentioned it going into the last break. For the first time since 2006, Duke won the ACC regular season title outright. They won it in 2010, but they were co-champions that year. This season, outright, Duke is the only champions of the ACC. I did not realize that NC State was the 15 seed in the conference tournament this year, just because after the Duke meeting, it just was irrelevant to me, and I really wasn't following. And this is coming from somebody, by the way, who has been heard on the show talking about how much I enjoy watching ACC basketball. But what happened to NC State, right? I mean, it's just crazy to hear about this from the outside looking in, and to now know that you're playing in the 15 game versus Clemson, who, by the way, I felt like started to play a little bit better towards the end of the season. I think a lot of people arguing that PJ Hall got snubbed for some all ACC teams and that sort of thing, was a really good interior player for the Tigers this season. But no, if you're looking for a team that could possibly make a run, I'll be honest, I really don't see it out of any of these Tuesday teams. I think they'll win their games, but I don't see any big run coming from any of these teams.
And that's fair, because I think all of these teams have shown flashes and moments. And listen, at any time in any tournament, anybody can get hot. But I don't think it's anybody on this group that can sustain that heat. I don't think there's anyone. Shout out to Pitt for having a decent season. Boston College, sure, they've improved, but certainly not going to be enough to beat some of these heavy hitters. But you're right. It's number 15 NC State. I'm trying to tell you, it got ugly real quick. There was a stretch there where you were just like, fight back. Give me something. Like, just let me know that there is still life within this program. But Coach Keats is still staying. They're going to give him another year thanks to, some NCAA scandals from some past coaches. So he's skated by with that. But he's going to have to figure out how to have a really good offseason when it comes to recruiting. Going to dip in that transfer portal, or he's going to figure out where Manny Bates needs to go, if he's going to come back, all of those fun things that you get to, deliver. And then we'll see on Wednesday, we'll have Florida State play Syracuse, and we'll also see Wake Forest play the winner of Pitt and Boston College. Virginia Tech play the winner of Clemson and NC State, and then Virginia play the winner of Louisville and Georgia Tech. Now, this bracket could get a little more interesting.
Yeah, here we go. Now we got some action that I'm liking because a lot of these teams here, again, we're not quite to the teams that had double byes all the way to the quarterfinals, but still, when you talk about 5 through 7 in terms of your seeding with Wake Forest, Virginia, and then Virginia Tech, I think these teams could start to make some runs, and Virginia being one of those teams at 6. It's a Tony Bennett coach team who knows what it takes. Virginia has won a national championship in 2019, the most recent ACC team to be able to say that they've done something like that. So I definitely think it's a possibility they're able to make a deep run. And then you've got Wake Forest. I mean, Steve Forbes, we learned yesterday, won ACC Coach of the Year. Alondis Williams was named ACC Player of the Year. Those guys are playing good basketball this time of year, and that's really important. Duke will play the winner of Syracuse and Florida State. That's the last game being played on Wednesday. It'll take place first, but it's the last game I'm talking about here. And the winner of that game plays Duke, and Duke has already played both of those teams twice. So you're setting up a potential third meeting with one of those schools. If I had to pick a school to make a run out of that group of teams, I do think it's Virginia.
Okay, interesting. I would hope that with the ACC Player of the Year, Wake Forest would certainly make a good run, but we've seen Wake Forest crap the bed a little bit a couple times. But I think also you talk about Virginia, Reese Beekman feeling snubbed about not getting Defensive Player of the Year, and I personally
Shout out
thought
Mark
it was
Williams,
right, either Mark or Leaky. I wouldn't
Right.
put Reese in the conversation, but that's neither here nor there. But everyone feels slighted. Then you got Virginia Tech, who listen. On paper, supposed to be great. Sometimes they get in their own way, but tournament teams can anybody can feel it. Anybody can get crazy. Crazier things have happened. So Thursday, you meet the top 4, right? So you'll get Duke to play the winner of Florida State Syracuse, which I personally feel like Florida State is going to beat Syracuse. But Betty Bayham, apparently he's first team all ACC. Let's talk about that. A little bit strange, but here we are. Miami, they'll play the winner of Wake Forest with the potential to play Wake Forest. Notre Dame will be in the mix, and then North Carolina will also be in the mix. So I think that of those teams, who's the most fraudulent top 4? Duke, Miami, Notre Dame, or North Carolina?
Wow, a great question. I'm not going to say Duke, and just because I don't believe them to be fraudulent at this point in the season. They're outright champs for a reason. North Carolina, all the respect in the world to them. We should mention Monday, after Locked On ACC was released to the world in the afternoon, we got the newest Associated Press Top 25 poll. And for the first time in the year 2022, you have to go all the way back to 2021. For the first time in the year 2022, we have 2 ACC teams that are in the top. Yeah,
I wish I had a horn.
Exactly.
Finally.
Duke is number 7, and then North Carolina comes in at number 25.
Yeah.
It'd be Notre Dame for me, Candace. I mean, still to this day, Notre Dame is second, and Mike Bray's not going to enjoy hearing that. But how? I mean, it's unbelievable what they've been able to do. You got to give them credit for winning game after game after game, but you look at the roster, and it's not an overwhelming basketball team. And you almost want to think at some point, some of these teams are going to kick it into gear and start to figure it out, play a little bit better basketball. And so, I would be very eerie if I was the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Yeah, I think Blake Wesley is going to have to play big, and him being young is going to be a factor. I think Lazewski is going to have the threes of his life and shoot out the gym every single time. Any big man with a 3 is always dangerous. But, I'd also say North Carolina, they might be feeling a little bit too high on this tide. Like, I can go ahead and talk about my team like a dirty dog.
That's a good way to look at it. That's fair. I mean, you do have such an emotional high after winning that game in Cameron that there is a possibility of a letdown game taking place.
They're lucky that they have time to regroup, and they're not going to be, in the Tuesday or Wednesday matchups.
The first game for North Carolina, I'll say it is likely going to be against Virginia. I think Virginia is going to win their game that's played on Wednesday. And granted, North Carolina beat Virginia pretty handily in Chapel Hill this season. But it doesn't take a rocket scientist to go back and look at the previous meetings between UNC and UVA. And the Cavaliers have dominated that series over the last 5 or 6 seasons. So, that's a good perspective. I wasn't going to go there at all, Candace, but now that you brought me there.
No, you have to. That's what Carolina has been all season, inconsistent. And the Virginia team that they met and stomped on is not the same Virginia team that they're going to see here in the tournament. I think that Carolina has to regroup and figure it out, but they are so used to being flaky. But also, I think I'm at the point where if they don't win another game, that's all I needed for the 2021-2022 season. If you just ruin Coach K's final game, I'm fine if we don't even make it to the I don't even care. I don't even care. Like, did you guys have fun for that one? Because you're always going to have that memory, and so many people are going to have that memory. Now, mind you, of course, we talk about Carolina and the expectations. Of course, they want more, but I'm sitting pretty. Like, there's nothing else for me. But I think that, to me, how Duke redeems itself, they have to win the national championship. Then nobody's gonna care about the retirement party.
Right.
But not to say that winning national championship is not impossible for them, because we know, that's how they roll. But I want to hear your thoughts on who you think is actually going to come away with this tournament win in just a second. We know that March Madness has got all of your bets going, and so if you want to get a part of a bracket, I strongly suggest you hit up Run Your Pool. It offers game types like Survivor or Pick X. They have options to edit scoring, and they offer more intel to make your picks. All stuff you won't find on ESPN or CBS. Clearly, we believe Run Your Pool because, like I said, we're running our brackets there ourselves. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/locked on. And while you're there, create your own bracket and make your pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. Again, that's runyourpool.com/locked on for your chance to win a cash prize. We look forward to seeing and beating you there. And of course, guys, it's time to rock and roll. You're ready to go. You want to add some bets to your life. BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. It remains the best place for sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just college basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, and even some football. We're already getting ready to see who's going to be your champions for next season going into the college season. So make sure you head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline is where the game starts. It's a lot about betting these days, and we know it's a sensitive topic if you're in the Atlanta area. Shout out to the Falcons. I'm so sorry, Calvin Ridley. You hate it had to be him. But hopefully if you're putting $1,500 down, you're not a current NFL player, and you know what's at stake. Like, that's just wild. Just wild.
It's crazy. I can't believe that story is real. Someone posted it felt like a random results generator would make up the Atlanta Falcons with all the crazy things that happened to them.
Like, my God. Like, when it rains, it just pours for that team. Clearly. Absolutely clearly. But that's neither here nor there. Clearly, there has to be a champion out of this ACC men's basketball tournament. And, of course, I feel like I know who you're going to pick, but I would love to hear from you, straight from the horse's mouth. Who's going to win the ACC tournament?
Well, Candace, as expected, the Duke Blue Devils are going to win the ACC tournament. I truly do believe that. It's just 3 games needed to get that done. I think the national championship is obviously what we want to happen, and I think there's a pathway for Duke to be able to do that and to send Mike Krzyzewski out on top. But Duke has dominated the conference this regular season. Some of their worst games, for whatever reason, strangely enough, were played inside Cameron Indoor Stadium this year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Duke's greatest wins on the season were played away from Cameron Indoor. And if I take like the North Carolina 20-point victory out of the equation, okay, the number 1 overall seed in the tournament is going to be Gonzaga. Duke defeated them on a neutral site floor. Another darling to make a Final Four run. It seemed that a lot of people think alongside Auburn could win the SEC. The Kentucky Wildcats, Duke defeated on a neutral site floor. Every time Duke has lost this season, they bounce back with a vengeance. And I just think this team has way too much swagger, way too much grit. And really, at the end of the day, they've got the most talent in the conference. They're going to figure it out. They're going to start to play well together. And I do think they're going to be able to find a way to win the ACC tournament.
Now, because I feel like this is such a you never know what you're going to get kind of league this year, I think Miami's going to win the whole thing. Just because why not Miami? Why not Cameron McGusty? Why not Isaiah Wong figuring out, finding ways to win? That's what I feel like, because it's too predictable for Duke to win. However, I know that Duke is in full villain mode. Like, they are so embarrassed by that loss that they have channeled a different beast. Like, and I went to see Batman this weekend, and of course, like, the Two-Face is not in this movie, but shout out to Batman. But I feel like Duke is Two-Face right now. Like, they knew they got played, their face got played in Cameron. So now they got to turn evil real quick and just handle business and really just go. It's villain mode. Like, they're different.
We know Theo John is going to be ready for this. Like, he's 100%. Always ready to star in a role like this. But I'm curious, from a non-Duke fan, Candace, when you look at the roster, And you see the swag that these Duke guys play with. You see Paulo. You've seen Trevor Keels at this point, who's one of my personal favorites. You see Wendell Moore.
Yeah.
Like, which of those Duke guys do you think is going to absolutely love taking on that villain role?
I really feel like it's AJ Griffin. He's the X factor to me. That mofo is going to figure out how to light it up, and everyone's going to be like, "Oh, we have to worry about Paulo. Oh, we have to worry about Mark." And AJ's like, "Oh, just feed me the rock," and that's
Right.
just going to be. He's just going to unload. I really feel like because no one's going to. They know what he's capable of, but I truly feel like he's going to take it to another level, as well as Trevor Keels and Jeremy Roach. God, I hate that I talk about. There's so many good. Like who isn't good?
They're so talented. That's the thing. They're so talented. It's got to all come together. And I love what you said there. There are games this season when Duke loses that you feel like, wow, Paulo needs to shoot the ball more. He needs to shoot 20-plus times. Well, he shot it 26 times against North Carolina. Yeah. And in the second half, it wasn't that efficient. And then you look back, and when Duke won by 20 in Chapel Hill, A.J. Griffin had 27 points. Went crazy against the Tar Heels. In the rematch in Cameron, AJ was kind of lost. He played 34 minutes, but only took 5 shots. Yeah. Like, there are so many shots that need to go around amongst these guys. When they find the perfect blend, and they have this year, this Duke team, as we have seen at moments, is really scary and really darn good.
Listen, I promise you that of the 80 alumni that showed up on Saturday, 60 of them texted AJ and the rest of them and said, "All right, you got to be the sharpshooter. You got to be the killer. Right. You got to make sure that you unload during the tournament. Like, this is your payback. You have to step like, okay, people are going to rag on this for maybe the next 24 hours, but we know how news cycle is in sports. It's going to go away. You have the time to redeem yourself." And I think they're going to do it. They're going to have to turn on a different mode.
Mark Williams has really improved throughout this entire season. He wins the Defensive Player of the Year award. He and Wendell Moore Jr. were a part of the ACC All-Defense team this season. The number of different times that Mark kind of bullied some of the big players of opposing teams and then would do a head tap because he just dunked on him to let the world know about it. I mean, he's going to come ready to play. This team's awesome.
Yeah, I will say Duke is definitely in sicko mode, so everyone needs to be aware and a little bit nervous. I'm just gonna say, like, I'm gonna keep it a band. I keep it honest on this show. Duke is definitely in sicko mode, and I fear for everybody that has to come in their way because you're just in their way at this point, right? So they'll figure it out. But JJ, it's always a pleasure to have you here on this show. I'm so glad we got to come back and talk. Yeah. Can you please remind these folks of where they can find you, follow your work?
For sure. I appreciate that, Candace. I'm excited to watch the ACC tournament this week. We mentioned things kind of getting more back to normal. So shout out to getting to go back up to Brooklyn and playing in front of full capacity crowd. Mm-hmm. And I do not want to get political by any stretch of the imagination whatsoever, but things are improving. Mandates are being lifted. There is going to be a whole new renewed sense of energy in the building. So I just can't wait. Like, this is a basketball junkie's dream. In 1 week from now, basically, we're going to be talking about the NCAA tournament bracket. So that's awesome. You can hear all of the Duke perspective on Locked On Blue Devils at @LO_Blue Devils on Twitter. I'm on Twitter with way too many underscores at _JJ_Jackson_, talking all things Duke 5 days a week. Thanks, Candace.
Of course, no doubt. Guys, make sure you come back tomorrow. We got more as we recap and give you updates for the ACC men's basketball tournament, as well as a little bit of football insight. Seasons are rocking and rolling. Have a couple interviews dropping. We have one from Mike Harley, Miami standout. He's talking about his path to the draft. We got some others coming this week that I'm super excited about. And you got the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. You got the Locked On Bracket Breakdown podcast coming soon, wherever you listen to podcasts, guys. So we've got you all covered here on our podcast network. So for Candace Cooper and JJ Jackson, until next time.